Good evening. I'll now call the City of Cannon Falls City Council meeting for Tuesday, June the 16th to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Duncan.
Here.
Gallops is absent. Holst.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Mattson.
Here.
Schoblum.
Here.
And Mayor Robinson.
Here. All please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last City Council meeting before the 4th of July. At this time, the chair will take a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Merle and a second by Bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Moves us on to item 5 this evening, public input. Citizens may speak to issues not on the agenda. Before speaking, please give your name and address for the minutes, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to address the council under public input for something not on the agenda? Seeing as there is no one, we will move on to item 6, which was supposed to be Senator Schmidt. Seeing as he's not here, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Items of this area of the agenda may be adopted, or they may be removed and placed on the business area of the agenda for discussion purposes before approving. Item A is the just and correct claims for the accounting period ending June the 12th, 2015. Item B are the meeting minutes for the June the 2nd, 2015 City Council meeting. Item C, Resolution 2134, supporting regional trail designation application in Greater Minnesota. Item D, Resolution 2135, approving a conditional use permit for Soul Fisher Collision. Item E, Resolution 2136, approving conditional use permit for public art mural. Item F, Public Works part-time hire. And item G, the revamp of the Archie Swenson Fields. Are there any issues anybody wishes to bring off this consent agenda this evening? If not, the chair will take a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Merle, second by Bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. If we'll go ahead and go into council business. If Senator Schmidt shows up, then we'll have him speak after we're done with council business. That moves us on to item 8, which is council business. That's the resignation of Mike Gesme as IT director and appointment as PEG access coordinator, and I'll turn it over to Ron.
Okay, I've briefly explained the background on Mr. Gesme. He has served the city and served the city well since March of 2005. Initially on a part-time basis and then hired full-time in 2011 in August. He has submitted his resignation as IT/PEG control or PEG access coordinator and would like to continue employment with us as the PEG access person. And the personnel committee discussed this at a meeting just prior to this meeting, and in the request here, I did say that more information would be provided. What the committee is recommending, there's really twofold, and you can speak a little bit too if you want, but it's really twofold, is to allow actually to keep Mr. Gesme on a part-time basis as PEG access control coordinator and at his existing wage, and then secondly the IT portion of his job duties. I've interviewed, Mike and I actually, Gesme interviewed a company that I had worked with they'd consulted with the city of Zumbrota when I was there starting in they started in 1998, so I've had a business relationship with them since that long, 17 years, I guess that is. And then they also worked with us in Lake City when I was administrator there. So they were my first kind of go-to company to discuss potentially picking up the IT services. knowing that it would be probably really difficult to find just the right person to do the cable access information stuff and to take over right away, and the information technology, information services part of it. And so Mike and I met with On-Site Computers a couple weeks ago. He had a follow-up with their tech that would be assigned to us if, in fact, they were brought on board. So Mike was real comfortable about their knowledge, their apparent knowledge of our system and so forth, and I've had a really good working relationship with them. Their help desk is open 8 in the morning until 10 at night. If there's emergencies, there's time after that. But they submitted 2 different proposals to us. One was basically a block of hours where we could buy a block of 20 hours. And then once that's used up, by blocks of 10. But a more thorough coverage, and the Personnel Committee also, kind of as a component of Mr. Gesney's resignation and filling his duties. We discussed it before this meeting too. And they do have a kind of a full service package that amounts to about, it's $22,000 a year, $1,900 a month, plus an initial setup and review fee of $1,600. So with what we would be paying Mike for his PEG access wages and what we would be paying in for the full agreement with the vendor, we'd be looking at we'd be saving money for budget-wise. And I made it clear with the company that staff members, they'd meet each of the staff members, find out what most of their primary issues are and so forth. So the Personnel Committee was comfortable going with the full service agreement with On-Site Computers.
So where are they located at?
They're out of Grand Meadow.
Okay.
I've got a fair amount of experience with them guys also, and they're very good at what they do. They're very prompt. If you call with a problem, usually within the hour, most of the time half an hour, they're on it remotely. I would highly recommend them.
Any other questions or concerns on that? The Personnel Committee did agree to that. So we're going to make this a threefold council action. Chair will take a motion to accept the resignation of Mike Gesney as the full-time IT director with his final work day being June the 29th and of 2015, and subsequently appointing him as the PEG Access Coordinator effective June the 30th of 2015 at his current wage, and the agreeing to a contract with On-Site Computers at a $1,900 per month basis with the annual, or with the setup fee of $1,600 to start.
Do you want one motion or do you want 3?
Can we do all in one, or do we need to do 3? Or can we just roll it all into one? Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So moved.
And I will second that motion for all 3 items.
Okay. Like a motion by Merle, a second by Bill. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as there is none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This time, before we go on to the other business, we're going to have Senator Matt Schmidt is here this evening to give us a wrap-up of the legislative session, which ended, well, oh, it did end last Friday night, didn't it? It is over with. He hasn't shaved since. Senator, welcome.
Actually, this goes back to our Easter recess. In an effort to relate to my northern colleagues, I decided to quit shaving. So I think it's worked out okay. But in any event, I just wanted to take the opportunity to brief you, Mr. Mayor and Council, on the 2015 legislative session. Seems like just yesterday we were here talking about the 2014 session. It's amazing how time flies. And of course, I think one thing I have to mention is we were this close a month ago last night to finishing our work on time. Of course, the Senate and the House did actually pass all of their budget bills by the stroke of midnight on the 18th of May. The governor, using his constitutional authority, vetoed 3 of our bills, said get back to work, we want to see some improvements. And I think the time that was used between then and this last Friday did produce better bills. And so it's nice to see our balanced budget, and I think we have a lot to feel good about this session. Of course, with divided government and different priorities, no one's going to get everything they want, but I think the biggest accomplishment to the 2015 legislative session is our continued fiscal responsibility with the budget. When I came to brief you here in 2013, we had made some very difficult decisions, turning our budget from a recurring string of deficits into one of surpluses. It was a really important session back in 2013, and the economic news and the budget news that we've had ever since has been almost entirely positive for Minnesota. And now this session we had a $1.8 billion surplus. Those surpluses are projected to continue into the future, and that structural stability with the budget is so important for state government, for funding everything from education to transportation to healthcare, public safety, but also making sure that we're a strong partner with our schools and our city councils, our county commissions, and in making sure that you can count on continued stream of local government aid, for instance, and also count on the state doing what it can to help hold down property taxes. And so I think we're in a very strong position. I hope to continue that momentum moving forward. Of course, this session was one that had mixed results. I think in terms of the positives, that continued responsibility with the budget, I think, is first and foremost an accomplishment in itself. We did not spend or tax cut our way from surplus into deficit. We've got another $800 million on the bottom line going into 2016. I would expect next year there will be a lot of discussion on comprehensive tax reform, some targeted attempts at property tax relief, local government aid increases. Also, I hope that we're able to rally around a transportation funding plan. I know that the need is incredibly great throughout Minnesota. Experts tell us that we underfund our roads and bridges by as much as $1 billion a year. That's $1 billion a year. And if we continue to ignore this problem, it's just going to get worse and worse. So we've got to make some tough choices in 2016 or any time between now and then in terms of getting the state to do more for our roads and bridges. I can just tell you what the Senate and the governor were proposing was essentially a gas tax increase, and almost half of that money would go directly to local government so you can fund your priorities. Roads and bridges, whatever it might be at the local level, about half of what we would raise in new revenue would go straight to local government. And I think that's really important, especially in southeastern Minnesota. We've got lots of bridges that are due for repair and replacement. Those things are not cheap. You need the money to get the job done. And so hopefully in 2016 we're able to rally around a compromise. The House, for its part, was proposing taking general fund dollars for transportation. And I have to tell you, I'm concerned about doing that because we've just endured this 15-year stretch where we've had budgets running deficit year in and year out. We don't want to risk putting ourselves back into that position. And so on the handout I'd shared with you, I have a little graph here on the top of the back page. And essentially what this shows is our projected budget situation in the next budget period, 2018-2019. That middle line there in gray is our expected budget, our expenditures that we would expect in the next budget period. The top line, that blue line, is what we expect in revenues at 1% inflation. So generally you can see about $1 billion surplus if we expect 1% inflation over the next several years. At 2% inflation, and that's what the economists tell us that we should be expecting, that inflation is going to rear its ugly head again, that surplus almost disappears. And we're still in the black, but not by much. Now, if you take that 2% inflation and you take from the general fund, as is being proposed, money for transportation, we're back in the red. We're running a deficit again. And so these are projections built on assumptions. How great is inflation going to be over the next couple of years? How much money are we going to take from the general fund for transportation? Those things can change. It's hard to predict. But I think what's important is that we remain committed to fiscal responsibility and not having our bridges and roads compete against education funding, for instance, or nursing homes or other priorities we have in the general fund. Now, that being said, if we're going to have any kind of compromise, both sides have to compromise. So we can't expect that the Senate proposal relying mostly on gas tax revenue or the House proposal relying mostly on general fund dollars. Not either one of them won't take the day. We've got to meet in the middle. In that sweet spot is probably going to revolve around some new money for transportation, some money from the general fund, and some money probably from bonding because interest rates are so darn low right now, and we tend to bond for these sorts of long-term assets anyhow. And so I think that's the sweet spot. That's where we get a transportation deal done next session, and I hope folks on the extremes are able to part ways with the party line right now and meet in the middle. I think that's how we get the job done. I mentioned that just because it's such an important issue. It's, I think, the one thing that that I regret that we weren't able to get done in 2015 is a comprehensive transportation funding package. And so hopefully with more money on the bottom line next year and in a commitment from the House and the Senate and the governor to get the job done, hopefully we can have a serious effort towards transportation funding. A couple other priorities I just wanted to mention. We were able to fund education at 2% on the funding formula in each of the next 2 years. If you talk to your superintendent or others in the community, they'll say, yeah, that about keeps up with the cost of doing business. And so it's by no means a panacea. It doesn't solve all the problems at the local level, but with the surplus and given the fact that education hasn't necessarily been funded at the appropriate levels over the last decade, I think it's a strong step in the right direction. We're also able to do some important things with teacher licensure, addressing the shortfall of teachers in rural Minnesota, and also at our higher education level, continue the tuition freeze at state colleges and universities moving forward, just to make higher education more accessible for students. Other things that I've been working on, not many folks are talking about the importance of broadband and high-speed internet access at the Capitol. At least they weren't when I got there. And that's something that I kind of have tried to elevate as an issue of importance in Minnesota. Upwards of 40% of homes and businesses in rural Minnesota lack access to high-speed internet. It's a competitive disadvantage for our rural areas, and it really owes itself to sparsely populated areas, a limited private investment capital. What we're trying to promote is partnerships. Get the state involved just a little bit to serve as a tipping point, a piece of leverage to get private investment to increase in high-speed internet networks to expand to hard-to-reach areas. I know in western Goodhue County we have some hard-to-reach areas, some places where we just don't have the level of service we might want to expect. And so as I look at this corridor here along Highway 52 in the years ahead, I think high-speed internet access is something that's going to be vital for our communities as we try to attract new families and businesses and such. So hopefully in round 2 of our border-to-border broadband fund, we may be able to see some of those dollars coming locally here. So I'm happy to talk more about that at any time, but I just wanted to give you a little overview on that issue. I imagine there's a few issues you may want to talk about, so rather than filibuster your meeting, I'll quit yapping. If you got any questions, fire them away.
Well, first, I'd just like to say thanks. I know you introduced a bill to possibly get the interchange done, but as things kind of wrapped up in a big hurry, nothing got done. But so thank you for that. My question still, and I've run it through different places, is the cost of health insurance for our businesses in southeastern Minnesota. We all know that we could take a business and drive,
Couple miles north.
couple miles north into Dakota County, and that cost is going to drop tremendously. And some people say it's a federal thing, and it's not a federal thing. It's a state thing, and when they voted on it in St. Paul, they really didn't look at it, and I know Mayo is the big provider here, and people up there in the cities are scared to try to push to get this overturned because they're scared their cost of in that big circle that they put all that in. I mean, we need to get something done by that because the people in southeastern Minnesota, we've got people right here in town that work in a different city, but because they live in Cannon Falls, their insurance is higher than their coworker. And it's ridiculous. I mean, that's something that needs to really be pushed this next session to try to get this changed. I mean, it's not only affecting people in Cannon Falls and Goodhue County, but it's affecting all of southeastern Minnesota, all the way down to Rochester. So, I mean, it's something that really needs to be looked at hard because it's not fair to this group because a certain group voted a certain way. So, I mean, we need to really push to get that changed next session.
If I could respond to that, the minute the geographic boundaries and regions were released along with the rates, I knew southeastern Minnesota was at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to healthcare premiums. I have to tell you, I've looked into this issue a lot. I've spent more time on this issue probably than any other issue outside of some select transportation challenges along this stretch of road here. And the options are not great. We would need a federal waiver, and it would be the first waiver issued in the country following the Affordable Care Act to change the boundaries.
I disagree.
And well, I've looked Department of Commerce. I'll tell you, I've had a lot of conversations about this. There's another challenge with that is that you don't find the support throughout much of the rest of Minnesota for changing the boundaries. Twin Cities likes their market. Western Minnesota likes its market. Southeastern Minnesota doesn't like its market. And so when you look at what we can do, this really comes down to a private market challenge. We have high-cost health care in southeastern Minnesota. And I don't think we have to say why. We kind of all recognize why. What we need to do is put pressure on our providers to lower the costs. And I think that's probably the easiest way of addressing this issue. And I have to tell you, short of federal legislation, I don't see it happening. And I'm happy to chat more with the council or with you, Mr. Mayor, or with the county board or whomever about this issue. But it's one I take very seriously. It's something that we have to continue to strive for more competitive premiums. That differential between Goodhue County and Dakota County, for instance, it's a competitive disadvantage for folks on this side of the border.
I think we should charge them the same thing as we get charged, because just because we live, there's a lot of people that live in Dakota County, the Twin Cities, and everywhere else that come down here for care.
55% of.
Yeah, I mean, so why are we being penalized just because we live here? That's ridiculous. I mean, the cost ought to be put up there, not down here, or it should be made even across the state. I mean, this market stuff is a bunch of crap, and I know who's driving it. Right. I mean, Mayo's driving it, and I know it is.
Yeah,
I mean, and we need to put the competition out there. We need to open up this market, and we need to push for it. And we need your help pushing for it next session, please.
Also, though, it's coming from Dakota County all the way up to St. Cloud is that one group. And that's the population is high. Well, they don't want to pay more. Yeah, you were right when you said,
Yeah, I mean, that's
what are you
a
gonna
political
do?
reality.
Because they don't want to.
I'll tell you what, I really want to have an open conversation about this, because I think this is, when you look at the healthcare market, the costs associated with healthcare, I think it's important for us to agree on the facts. I think it's important for us to point our fingers at the challenges that are out there and to rally around solutions that can make a difference. And so if anyone in this room would like to have a discussion with Department of Commerce, with others in Minnesota about the challenges and what we can do and what we frankly can't do politically, I'd be happy to lead that charge. And if you'd like to have something here in town, I can bring the commissioner down, I can bring others down, because this is an important issue. And I think it's really important for us to have a full understanding of what we can do, what we can't do, and direct our energies accordingly. I think what I've focused my energies on is getting as much information as I can and talking to our provider and sharing my concerns with their costs. And I think that's where I can be effective, maybe not overnight, but over the long term, in trying to address that that discrepancy between Dakota and Goodhue counties. And folks, believe me, I take this challenge very seriously. It is a huge detriment to our area.
You'd find it easier if this country as a whole would allow health insurance sales across state lines. That would.
I've looked into that as well.
But that's the ultimate solution. I do have.
Just fire away.
One, you mentioned education funding and stuff, but the funding formula is still horrible. Why should a town like Cannon only get 6,000 or 7,000 per student, and someone in St. Paul gets 13,000? That's wrong. Same kids, yeah, they got more population. I understand that, but that's killing our school district, and I'm sure many small ones across the state. So that has to be adjusted. That's my first thought. Second one, you talked about transportation, which is very important. But the gas tax is the wrong thing. Again, not just Cannon Falls, but a lot of small towns, people have to commute to the larger areas, and you're going to kill them again if you add another 10, 15, 20, 25 cents a gallon. And I think that's the wrong way to go.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just tell you, we can't solve our transportation funding problems alone through the general fund. We can bond a little bit for it. We can take some money from the general fund. But, you know, as I hope you understand with the graph I shared with you, the money just isn't there unless we're willing to make deep cuts into healthcare or education. And that's something that we can talk about. But generally over time, transportation has not won in those sorts of conversations when you pit it against education or healthcare. And so the challenge is, you know, how do you leverage the appropriate dollars to solve this problem? I'm open-minded. I want to put a deal together that works for folks, that solves a problem. You know, I really don't necessarily need to see new revenue myself, but on the flip side, it's got to be sustainable. It can't put our state budget in risk of running deficits again. And I think that's the number one, you know, responsibility of this legislature is to budget responsibly. And I think we had a period in Minnesota where we weren't doing that. And over the last couple of years, we're not running deficits, we're running surpluses, probably a little bit higher than we need, so we're going to have to, you know, get a surplus that's an appropriate level. But we can't simply look to the general fund to solve our transportation funding problems. So the challenge is going to be, do we go halfway and do something, but know that we're still leaving a lot of the problem out there to be addressed down the road while the problem continues to get worse and worse? Or do we look for a balanced approach that I think takes into account the need for some new revenue? Where that revenue comes from, I'm not sure. But I'll tell you, you know, driving down, I was at the Capitol Friday. You drive down, you see a difference in gas prices, 30 cents, 40 cents sometimes. And so is there an appropriate level in there of 5 cents, 10 cents a gallon? I'm not sure. But I think I hear from a lot of folks who say we need the new revenue for roads and bridges. And I know under our plan that local government would get about half of that. And so you could fund your priorities accordingly. The alternative, if we don't get a bill done, is the pressure remains at local government. And you guys, you know, we got the wheelage tax that was put out there as an option for folks in the past. Property taxes are really the only alternative, and those are incredibly regressive. It's not a user fee. It's not tied to one's ability to pay. It's not tied to your use of the roads. So as we look at this, I'm open-minded to any solution that can get the job done, that's sustainable, that doesn't put our general fund at risk. But I think we may have to be open-minded to some new revenues for transportation, wherever they might come from.
But, and one other item, I guess, is just on taxation in general. I know you touched upon redoing our tax structure, and we need it at both the state and the federal level, because we got to get all these special interests out of it and just do a very simple thing. You know, IRS and stuff like that, you shouldn't have to go through volumes this deep for each and everything. It should be, it's very simple. It's really simple, but, and people at the state and the federal level, all they do is they get their buddies come in and here's a little money, vote this way, and that's how our country unfortunately runs. I mean, you may disagree with it, but that's the reality.
I just haven't seen it, you know, in terms of like the lobbying. I haven't been told to vote one way or another, and certainly haven't been given money to do so. But I'll tell you what, indisputably, we can make our tax code simpler, and I think that's something that we can all agree on. I know every year we have a tax bill. We usually promote tax conformity, trying to align the state tax code with the federal tax code, just so it's easier for folks to do taxes, so you're not going to get burned. It's, you know, state treats certain income one way while the federal government treats it another way, and I think that's really important for us to do. I think it's also important for us to recognize where we may be outliers in some cases relative to our neighboring states, whether relative to other states in the country, and so I think that we've got to continue to strive towards a competitive tax code in Minnesota, and that's something, you know, it's going to be a moving target, but it's something I think we all need to recognize is out there. You know, I should just mention, you know, you guys hopefully should feel good about this. That second chart on the back page of this handout talks about the price of government in Minnesota. And essentially this is the share of local government and state government taxes of our state wealth. So essentially what it's showing is that number is going down. As our state gets wealthier, we're spending less money per dollar of wealth in this state over time, and it's projected to continue to decline. So I know a lot of us still feel nickeled and dimed, and you know, coming out of the recession, not everybody's emerging on equally strong footing. Nonetheless, this chart does show that average cost of government, that price of government, is going down. Is it ever going to be good enough? I don't know, but I think it's something to be mindful of. We measured this for a reason. It came to us from the State Chamber of Commerce back in the early 90s, and we've been tracking it ever since. And I think we got the trend line moving in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that we're where we want to be quite yet. But that does address some of those issues with overall taxation. Folks, any questions? Any other questions? You know, I would really like to follow up on this healthcare issue because it's something that I tell you, I spend just as much time on that as anything. and want to put our finger on things that we're able to address at the state level. So I'd welcome the chance to follow up on that.
And, Ron?
To that note too, and you'd offered to lead that discussion or lead the charge on that. And I know the EDA has been of particular really interested and concerned more so than interested.
Right.
And I know they would like that opportunity to have that dialogue if the Department of Commerce would be so willing.
I know they would be willing, so we'll plan on doing that, and I'll connect with Mr. Mayor and City Administrator, and we can figure out a time for that sort of discussion. So otherwise, folks, I don't have all the answers. I never will. So if you have any more feedback, never hesitate to give me a call, shoot me an email. I take this job of staying connected with those I serve very seriously. Always making rounds with city council, school boards, that sort of thing. So if you got any questions, never hesitate to shoot a line. And some of these issues we may not necessarily be on the same page today, but I want to try to foster a path forward for us to do some good in these areas.
I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming down. And I appreciate the hard work you've done. I know I met with you a couple times up at the Capitol this session, and we're still going to keep pushing to get this transportation stuff done and get the job completed on the south side that was started, and we'll keep working together. City and do what we can to support getting the job done. But we need to work together on this healthcare stuff too, and see if we can get this taken care of for Southeast Minnesota, because
Sounds good.
It's wrong.
So I probably shouldn't say this. I can say it here, though. Between transportation and this healthcare issue, I think Cannon Falls is getting a disproportionate share of my time and attention. So maybe that's a good thing, but hopefully we're able to find some good solutions to these challenges, because I know they're real.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Take care.
Yep. Okay, that moves us on to reports. Mr. Maroney.
I have a subject I'd like to talk about. It's plaguing our wastewater industry, and that's flushable products. The industry standard is if something flushes, it's flushable. That's all they have. So when you flush those baby wipes down, they don't magically disintegrate, break up. They end up in our pumps. And if I can't bring it up enough that the user should not be flushing anything but toilet paper and human waste. Even some simple things like floss. Well, you think, well, what's a foot of floss? Well, if there's 500 people that have flushed a foot of floss that day, that's 500 feet of floss that are coming and winding around pumps. That pump has to be pulled. There's a huge cost for some of this stuff. Backups, sewer backups. Every sewer backup I've ever been on is usually root-related or baby wipe-related. Some will even get so bold as to flush diapers down. We can't continue this. I know there's a city in Minnesota right now that is suing the industry about these flushables, so I just can't preach it enough to people. When you're flushing flushable cat litter or flushable wipes, you're rolling the dice and hoping they get out of your system before they clog up. But if they don't, they're going to get in your neighborhood artery. You're going to have sewer backup in your neighborhood, or they're going to end up at the plant within thousands of dollars worth of losses. So if anybody has other questions on that, if they ever have questions on their water usage, please feel free to call me. Water bills are not even. You can't ask your neighbor how much is your water bill any more than you could ask him what is your grocery bill. And some of the users don't seem to correlate that it's user-based and driven off the cubic feet. And yes, if you have a leak, it's going to double your sewer rate, which doubles, I don't like treating clean water any more than you guys like paying for sewage treatment on the clean water, but our pumps don't know the difference. So when the pump water gets down there, so if I could preach anything to people is just watch what goes down your toilet and watch what goes through your meter. We don't randomly just pick a dollar amount every month. It's tied, and meters are accurate right down to, I've never seen an inaccurate meter in 26 years. So if the meter said it went through, it went through. Now we have the capability where if you do have a high bill, we can come out, feed that into our computer, and we can tell you exactly what hour it spiked. So if your bill spiked and your neighbor happened to fill his pool that same weekend, we see it. We can see that kind of stuff. So, and it just recently happened like that. So, like I said,
Tom, is there anything that, whether it's Cannon Falls or any other city, can do regarding the wrong items appearing in our,
It's just education. I think the average person just thinks once it goes in the toilet, I don't know where it goes, but it's gone. And I think if they'd educate themselves on what actually happens, where it goes, and I'm always open to giving tours at the wastewater plant just so you kind of have an idea how costly an operation it is. But it isn't just as simple as flushing it and hope it goes away. It doesn't. And that even goes through to so many areas of home ownership. You blow your grass out in the street, it looks awful. But the secondary factor is it clogs a storm sewer catch basin. So now the design of that whole system is not proper. Now it's running down 2 blocks of the neighbors. But the worst thing what we're trying to get through to people is that goes into the rivers, streams, lakes as phosphorus buildup. That's why we have all these algae blooms. So if you want to keep your lakes swimmable, don't be blowing 3 feet out into the street of grass clippings. And there is a city ordinance against it, and I'm going to have to start enforcing it strictly because it happens every day. People blow their lawn out in the street. But like I said, there's so many areas I just wish people would educate themselves on instead of just say the city takes care of it. It's not the case. The city takes care of it. Ka-ching, it costs you money, it costs us money, and I just like to keep the bills down too. It's just frustrating with the flushable baby wipes. We can't continue to have those.
Tom, didn't you have something on the internet or something that one time?
Yep, there's a nice little video on our city website that basically shows what happens to all that products. That you can pretty much figure if it doesn't break down in water, you're at risk of getting a sewer backup. And the only thing that breaks down in water is toilet paper. Napkins don't, paper towels, feminine hygiene products. I better stop while I hit, but we get it all down there. You know, banana peels, golf balls, I don't know, 2x4s, just. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Tom. Chief?
That's hard to follow up behind. But, Tom is correct in the, the grass clippings into the streets. We haven't issued citations on that in a while, but I know every year the officers will stop and remind some of our rather large depositors of either snow or grass clippings that end up in the street. I mean, it does have a cost to the city, direct and indirect. But more importantly, the mayor pointed out that this is the last council meeting before the 4th of July. So that's a pretty big week for us. We've got the bike race this Thursday. So people are going to experience some street closings, especially along the circuit of that. Once that's done, we're also experienced some street closings for the 4th of July parade. Again, this year, staffing-wise, we're a little short-staffed during the day, so we're going to be doing that with myself and 2 officers, and hopefully some of our reserves. But the way we've worked around it is we end up closing parts of the route earlier. It allows us to get those areas secure and barricades up, that type of stuff. So you will see that happening again this year. And the primary reason is because the 4th falls over the weekend. We're keeping our staffing levels at night at the same level. So hopefully there won't be too many interruptions for people that are trying to get to a friend's or a neighbor's to watch the parade. We try to be flexible and work with people, but by the same token, please don't move the barricades, whether for the bike race or for the 4th of July. Once they're up, they're up. Please don't go around them. Other than that, the police commission, I sent an email out to the commission members. Would like to meet on July 7th before our council meeting. I talked with Tom. His Public Works Committee is going to be meeting that night, so we're going to try to coordinate our times because we have 1 joint member. Hopefully it'll all work out. That's all I can think of at this time, and hopefully some of you can come down and watch the bicycle race. It's always an interesting time. I get to visit with a lot of people, and I enjoy it. I don't know if they do as much, but hopefully we'll see some of you guys down there.
Ron?
I really have nothing to report except I'll work with staff on doing some sort of public service announcements on the items that were brought up tonight and let us help the public be educated.
Merle?
Happy 4th of July, everybody. Be safe.
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Nothing.
Just to report on my trip to Washington. We went up there talking transportation at the federal level, and they're not getting anything done up there either. But the big thing is with transportation is the fact that everybody needs to get on the phone, call their legislators in Washington, D.C., and tell them to get off the snot and get a transportation bill done. You know, our roads and bridges are falling apart, you know, so, I mean, they need to come up with a solution. It's been put off too long. They can fund everything else, but they can't fund they can't fund the roads and the bridges that most people drive on a daily basis. So, it's going to take all of us getting on the phone and pushing it to get that issue done. I mean, they keep kicking that can down the road further and further, and the costs keep going up. So it's something that we've all got to do whenever you can. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, it was a good trip. Got to meet with some of the folks up there, and again, seeing how it's done up there, and so. Also like to congratulate Dwayne Hermanson, one of our citizens here, who was just appointed or sworn in as the new state commander for the Veterans of Foreign Wars for the state of Minnesota. So congratulations to Dwayne, and also congratulations to all the graduates from Cannon Falls High School this year. So good luck to all of you in the future, and you know, hopefully some of you will stay right here at home once you get done with college and help this community thrive. So that's all I've got this evening. If nobody else has anything, the chair will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.